Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're diving into something kind of mind-bending. We're going to look at English words not as single, solid objects, but as these intricate, almost architectural structures built from smaller, reusable pieces. Think of them literally like linguistic Lego bricks. Once you see how they actually connect, you're never going to look at a sentence the exact same way again. Let's get into it.
Real quick, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the building blocks of words, free versus bound morphemes, a really fascinating thing called the ungainly problem, how to slice words apart, and finally, simple, complex, and compound words.
Okay, part 1. The building blocks of words. Meet the morpheme.
So, if you take a word, right, and you strip it all the way down, just peeling back the layers until you literally can't peel anymore without destroying the meaning entirely, what you're left with is a morpheme. It's the absolute, ultimate, indivisible unit of meaning in the English language. Now, to prove a segment is actually a morpheme, it has to pass 3 really strict textbook criteria. First, it obviously has to have meaning. Second, it cannot be divided without violating that meaning or just leaving a bunch of meaningless remainders. And third, it recurs in different environments with a relatively stable meaning. For example, take the word straight. It has a clear meaning, but if you try to divide it into straw and ate, well, you just get meaningless fragments that have absolutely nothing to do with the original word. So straight is, by definition, a single morpheme.
Moving right along to part 2. Free versus bound morphemes. Independence versus attachment.
You know, morphemes basically fall into 2 major camps. Free morphemes are the independent ones. You can utter them totally on their own, like answering the question, what are you going to do with just eat? Done. Makes perfect sense. Bound morphemes, on the other hand, are dependent. They're basically the snap-on attachments of language, like anti or ly. They absolutely must be annexed to something else to actually form a real word. And we spot these snap-on attachments in everyday vocabulary all the time. In speaker, the is bound. In kingdom, it's dumb. In undo, it's that prefix un. Because, you'd never just walk up to someone and say dumb or un, right? It doesn't make any sense. They require that base foundation to function.
Which brings us to part 3. The ungainly problem. When language evolves.
Okay, let me ask you this. We all know the word ungainly, right? It means awkward or clumsy. But what exactly does gainly mean? Think about it. It's not really in common use anymore, and that makes figuring out its morphemes surprisingly complicated.
This happens because, well, words fade over time. Look at winsome. It actually comes from the Old English word win, which meant joy. Or take bankrupt, which historically meant a literally broken bench. But those original metaphors and obsolete bases, they've completely died out in modern English. So what used to be combinations of different linguistic parts are now essentially just treated as single, indivisible morphemes in our minds today. Pretty wild, right?
All right, part 4. Slicing words apart. Immediate constituents.
So, when we analyze a complex word like ungentlemanly, we don't just smash it into individual pieces all at once like a piñata. Instead, we dismantle it systematically, layer by layer, in the exact reverse order of how it was originally built.
Here's how that exact sequence looks. First, we cut right between un and gentlemanly. Why? Because if we cut the ly off first, we'd be left with ungentleman, and actually that word doesn't exist in English. We have to divide the word into recognizable, existing parts at every single step along the way. From there, we can cleanly split gentlemanly into gentleman and ly, and so on, until we hit those bedrock morphemes we talked about earlier.
And finally, part 5. Simple, complex, and compound final assembly.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that every single word you speak falls into one of 3 buckets. You've got simple words, which consist of a single free morpheme, like slay or long, then complex words, which have at least one bound form in them, like exclude or telephone, and finally, compound words, which are formed by sticking 2 completely free morphemes together, like greenhouse or outside.
You can really see how this classification works in practice once you start looking for it. A word like navish takes a free base and adds a bound suffix, making it complex. Philosophy is built from bound roots, which also makes it complex. Honestly, once you know the rules, every word just becomes this entirely predictable, really satisfying puzzle.
So, I want to leave you with a quick challenge to test out your new morphological X-ray vision. Take a second, look around the room you're in right now. Find a complex word, maybe on a book, a screen, a coffee label.
How many ultimate constituents can you mentally slice it into? Which parts are free and which are bound? Keep practicing this, and I promise the hidden mechanics of everyday language are going to stay forever visible to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.